deeper than this. Is this verse Makki or Madani? Makes a big difference. Is the verse Muhkam or Mutashabih? Makes a big difference. All these distinctions of the Quran. So when someone comes to us today and tells you Islam is this and his Quran, ask them, don't just give me a verse of Quran. Tell me, when was it revealed? To whom was it revealed? What was happening at the time? What the Prophet said? What have the Mufassirin said? What have the Falasifa? What have all the ulama said? What did the Prophets before? What theme does that one verse come from? Was it Makki? Was it Madani? Is it Muhkam? And only then can they make one claim about Islam. That's how deep this thing goes. The moment we let go of the authority and the meaning of the verse, we've lost the Quran itself. Anyone can follow this book without meaning it. But we have to go back to those ulama who explain to us the meaning of that verse. Here someone might ask a question. Some verses are actually ambiguous though. They are hard to understand. Some are simple. They are muhkam. Qul huwallahu ahad. Everyone knows there's no God but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a story that they say it was about Abu Abbas, but it might be someone else. When his father says to him, say one, he says one. Father says, say two. Abbas says, how can the tongue which says oneness of Allah say any number other than one? A child knows stories. But when it comes to those ambiguous verses, we have to go deeper than tafsir. We have to go to ta'wil. That's a whole different world of understanding. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman, the verse reads, Bismillah ar-Rahman. هو الذي أنزل عليك الكتاب منه آيات محكمات أو محكمات هو أم الكتاب. He's revealed to you this book. Among it there are some verses minhum which are muhkam, they are clear. These are kitab, they make up the basis of this book. Clear, unambiguous verses. وأخرى متشابهات, and the others are called mutashabih. They are not like this. They are equivocal. They can have different interpretations which you might not know about. فأما الذين في قلوبهم زيغ فيتبعون ما تشابهات منه ابتغاء الفتنة وابتغاء التأويل. As for those verses of the Quran, those people whose hearts have been deviated, they will follow those which are mutashabihat, and they try and seek fitna from those ambiguous verses. They'll take a verse which is not clear, find a fasad that could be linked by to the verse, and employ it upon you. But the verse continues, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَعْوِيلُ. No one knows the inner reality of the verse, إِلَّا اللَّهِ, except Allah, وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ. And those who are deeply entrenched in knowledge. Only Allah. And those who are rasikhuna means it's like they are embedded in ilm, they are part of ilm. Only they can explain this verse to you. يقولون آمنا به كل من عند ربنا. They're the ones who say we believe in everything which comes from God. وما يذكروا إلى أولي الألباب. And there is no one like this except those people of remembrance. There are many times in history people went to the Quran and tried to misguide the masses with it. And ulil albab, يعني أهل البيت, were the ones who corrected their false ideas for these ambiguous verses. For example, when it comes to Allah, there are so many wrong ideas of who God actually is. So many wrong ideas. And throughout history, people have gone through trying to misguide others. One idea that comes is from many books with fake concocted Israeliyat narrations. Israeliyat meaning what? Narrations which were believed in other religions, employed in Islam to misguide people. For example, the Quran says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي فَقُولُهُ سَاجِدِينَ. We breathed into him from our soul, يعني into Adam. And we said, everyone bow down to Adam. Min ruhi, from our soul. Some people took this to mean Adam is created literally in the image of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Go to a narration from Abu Huraira where he writes, Allah created Adam how he himself was. For that reason Adam was 60 feet tall, because Allah was 60 feet tall. It's in the books, people actually believe this. Therefore, Adam was 60 feet tall. His child was a little bit shorter, until now when Insan reaches this height. Because we've reduced in height, but Allah was of that greater height. Okay, another narration, again from Abu Huraira. This guy keeps coming up in these types of narrations. What's the narration? A man hit another man in the face. So, the Prophet allegedly said to them, don't hit him, the other man, because, well, Adam was created in Allah's image, and you're hitting the image of God, meaning God has a face like the one that you've hit. That's what they believed. Now come to Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. They say to him, Ya Abu Talib, what is this? These guys are coming to us and saying to us, Adam was 60 feet tall, Allah looks like him, and if you hit someone in the face, you hit in the face of God. Muhammad replies, first of all, Allah is laysa kamithlihi shay. He's like no other thing. So don't ascribe physical body parts to one who has no need of physical body parts. Then he says, as for the verse of Quran, the verse they say about this, that when you hit someone, you're hitting the face of God. The true narration is, don't hit that man because Adam was made in the same image he was made. So you're insulting Adam, who was made in the image of your brother who you struck. Not Allah's face, Adam's face. How can they concoct this narration? Okay, another example. All of us read that kullu man alayha fan. All things will be destroyed except the face, Allah, except the face of God. Same thing. They said, well, there must be a face of God. The God has a face. And if God has a face, he must have expressions. So Ibn Khuzaymah has a book in which he writes that in the same way animals have a head and a face, Allah is the same like this. They go to Imam Ali again. Imam Ali says, did I not tell you some verses are not literal, they're metaphorical? The face of Allah, wajh Allah here mean that yabqa wajh Allah, and everything will perish except the face of God, actually means all things will perish except that one religion which takes you back to Allah. That's the face of God. This is the meaning of the verse. Okay. Then they said, okay, the verse says, Inna Allahu kana sami'an basir. Allah hears and sees. So maybe he's got ears and eyes. So again, guess who it is? Abu Hurairah again. 20 years after the Prophet coming out with all these narrations, he says in one of his books, what does this verse mean? It means Allah has an eye and an ear. And the Rawi says when Abu Hurairah would say this, he'd hold on to his eye and his ear and say just like this. And he said the Prophet said these words. Okay, now they go to the Imams. In fact, we don't even need to go to the Imams. If you go to the Shu'ara, they say that there's one poem in which there are 60 different interpretations to ear in the Quran. So who told you it's a literal ear? There are over 10 interpretations of that same idea that there is an eye in the Quran. And the idea of Allah looking at something can mean so many things. Even the Shu'ara answer this. Okay, then they come and say, no, there is Yadullah, there's a hand of God in the Quran. Yadullahu fawqa aydihim. The Quran says the hand of God was on their hands. So they say maybe God has a hand. And then they actually, not just hands, maybe he has fingers. So go to Muslim, there's a narration like this where they say, not only God has hands, God has fingers. One finger's on heaven, one finger's on hell, one finger's on water, one finger's on earth, one finger's on insan. And Allah points to them and says, Ana Malik al-Mulk. We have that narration. They go to the Ahlul and say, Ya Ahlul Bayt, what are they saying? They take these ambiguous verses, you see what I'm trying to say? And they add these weird interpretations. The Imam say, no, Yadullah in this case means the power of Allah, the strength of Allah. God is showing you through a metaphor, He is Qadir ala kulli shay. Then they come and say, no, what about the idea that you have the feet of Allah? Yakshif an saqin, it's in the Quran, that Allah's feet are in the Quran. And so we'll have a narration. What's the narration they have this time? They say heaven and hell were discussing. And they were arguing, which of us is greater? So they say, hell says I'm greater because God's given me the most evil people inside me. And heaven says, well, I'm greater because I have the most humble people in me. So then they say, Allah then answers and says, I'll show you who's greater. I will fill you both with more people than you can bear. They say, hell says, I've not got enough people. In their books it's written, Allah places His foot in hell, fills hell with His foot and says, have you had enough now that I have filled hell with my foot? It's in their books. Okay, now they go to Ali Muhammad and say, what does this verse mean? You have a hand and foot in the Quran. And they said they went to Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam. Imam, when he hears what they believe, he holds on to his own foot, looks up and says, Subhanallah, I praise Allah over all these things they say about Him. Then he's holding his own foot to show God's foot is nothing like this foot. It means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran is showing, it's a demonstration of his rububiyyat in that verse of the Quran. It's a demonstration, a metaphor. Then another narration, what about arsh and kursi? And they say in a narration, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sits on his throne, they say. And the throne is so expansive, it covers all of the heavens. But even then Allah doesn't fit inside the arsh. And so on 4 finger spans, Allah spills over the arsh that he's sitting on. In the books. And the Ahlul Bayt say, no, kursi is a sign of the abudiyyat of Allah. He is above all things. And arsh is a sign of the ilm of Allah. He has knowledge of all things. Don't you see the meaning? Here's what I'm trying to say to you through these verses. There are many mutashabihat verses. They are ambiguous. They are not clear. But we have to go back to an authority to explain what they mean. And every time we needed someone to explain these verses, every time, Ahlul Bayt were there to help us. Someone might say to us, why are we going to Ahlul Bayt to answer the Quran? What is their ta'alluq with the Quran? Don't we answer this verse says, no one knows ta'wil al-Quran illa rasikhuna fil ilm. Those who are deeply entrenched in knowledge. Who are those people who are deeply entrenched in ilm if not the family of Fatima? Then they say, where is Ali in the Quran? That every time you have a verse you go to the same Ali. And we answer, tell us where is Ali not in the Quran that we don't find him? Every chapter we open, one alim says, I found 600 verses in dhikr of Ali in the Quran. Another alim says, I found 1,000 verses in honor of Ali in the Quran. Another scholar says, Sunni scholar, I found 1,200 verses only in honor of Abu Turab in the Quran. Where else would we go to understand the book except Ahlul Bayt? Wherever you look, you find them. If you look at the Quran, you find those verses. Which verse? Ayat Tathir, Ahlul Bayt. And the Fusana of Ahlul Bayt, Ahlul Bayt in the Quran. Alladhina, which one? Those who pray namaz and give zakat, hum raki'un, Ahlul Bayt. Qul la as'alukum alayhi ajran illa al-mawaddata fil qurba, Ahlul Bayt. When you don't know, ask Ahlul Dhikr, Ahlul Bayt. It's like their names are scattered in the Quran. One Sunni scholar says, whenever you read the verse, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, oh those who believe, if the verse is positive, all of us Ahlul Sunnah believe the first of amanu of this verse is Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salam. The first of them. If anyone was mentioned, it's him. Okay. Sometimes Ali Muhammad are in names. Sometimes it's not just names. They're mentioned in terms of their role. For example, Ahlul Dhikr, the ones of remembrance. Rasikhuna fil ilm. Wa'tasimu bihablillahi jami'an. All of you hold true to the one rope of God. A Bedouin goes to the Prophet and says, Ya Rasulullah, what is that one rope of God? The Quran is telling us, if you are misguided, go back to one rope. The Prophet says, I bear witness, this rope of Allah is none other than my brother Ali. The one who holds on to him is saved, the one who lets go is lost. Come to Urwatul Wuthqa, same thing. They say, Ya Rasulullah, who's Urwatul Wuthqa? He says, Abu Turab is Urwatul Wuthqa. Then they say, what about these other verses? Which verse? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna anzalnahu fi laylatul qadr. Wa ma adraka ma laylatul qadr. We've revealed to you Laylatul Qadr. What is Qadr? They say to us, when Allah descends His Amr on this earth, where is the one who is Sahib al-Amr, who receives all the Qadr of Allah on Laylatul Qadr? Then read the verse. The only one who is the one who receives Wahi or Qadr on this night is Imam Sahib al-Zaman alayhi salam. Read the salawat. Then there are some places you won't know to find Ahlul Bayt unless you have ilm of Ahlul Bayt. For example, don't you read every day, Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim? Don't you read every day, guide us to the straight path? And everyone's looking in life, what's that straight path? What's that straight path? I've only ever seen one man stand and say, Ana Ali ibn Abi Talib wa ana sirat al-mustaqim. One man says, I'm that straight path. Then the Quran might say about these things. What about Nahl? What's the B in the Quran, which sometimes it goes forward, sometimes it goes back? The Imam say, you know when Imam goes into ghaiba and then comes back? That's the B in the Quran. Sometimes it's near you, sometimes it's far. Then the verse says, what about wa shamsi wa duha? The sun and the moon. The Imam Ali says, I follow the Prophet like the moon follows the sun in the sky. Wherever he goes, I went. Then we have the verse. Which verse? Shajaratun tayyiba. What's that firm tree in the Quran? Everyone's asking, what's this tree? Jibreel himself says, Ya Rasulullah, I bear witness, you are Shajaratun tayyiba. Ali is the tree, the branch of this tree. And you know the flowers of this tree? They are Husain coming from Ali and Fatima. Yeah. Then we have Lu'lu. Yeah. Everywhere you look, there's some dhikr of this family. Okay, Lu'lu wal Marjan. Lu'lu and Marjan, what are those two divine pearls that when two oceans can't come near each other, from between them, two pearls come in them. One shining coral, one shining beauty. Which one? They say those two oceans which don't come near. One is Taharat, one is Wilayat. And only from the Taharat of Zahra and the Wilayat of Ali can the Lu'lu and Marjan of Hassan wal Hussain be born. It's in the Quran. Quran says, وَالسَّابِقُونَ السَّابِقُونَ أُولَٰئِكَ الْمُقَرَّبُونَ. There are some people who rush ahead of others and they are first. Who are those people who are first in the Quran? Do we not say, Ya Ali, you are awwal, Ya Ali, you are akhir? Have you heard this? They say, Ya Shia, this is kufr. How can you say Ali's awwal and akhir? Allah's awwal and akhir. What do we answer? Ali's awwal how? Sabiqun as-sabiqun. The first person to pray behind Rasulullah was Ali. They say Rasulullah Ali is akhir. How is he akhir? The last face Rasulullah saw on this earth was the face of Ali bin Abi Talib. Then they say, how is he akhir? Have you not read the Quran? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Al-yawm akmaltu lakum dinakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati. On this day of last days, I have finally perfected your deen. What is that one thing which comes right at the end of Islam? Now the deen. Which thing? When Ali is standing, Muhammad is standing, Ali said, Man kuntu mawla fahada Aliyun mawla. In a world where there's no authority anymore, Ahlul Bayt are the authority of this Quran. Let me give you one more riwayat to make this point very clear before we go on to the Masail. One more point. This hadith comes from Ali alayhi salam himself. Imam Ali speaks himself when he's speaking about what is the reality of the Quran. What's the truth about this book? He says, Alam, know this. Kullu asrarullahu ta'ala fi kitab as-samawiyya. All of Allah's secrets are contained in a heavenly book in the skies. Yani Lohul Mahfud, or by Lohul Mahfud, Al-Kitab, Kitab. All of his secrets are in that one book. Okay, then he says, وَمَا أَسْرَى اللَّهُ تَعَالَى فِي كِتَابِ السَّمَاوِيَّةِ فِي الْقُرْآنِ. And all of those secrets found in that book of heaven, you'll find it in the Quran in front of you. وَمَا فِي الْقُرْآنِ فِي الْفَاتِحَةِ. And all of the secrets of the heavens and the earth of the Quran, you'll find them encapsulated in Surah Al-Fatiha. وَمَا فِي الْفَاتِحَةِ فِي الْبِسْمِ. All of the secrets of God which are in Surah the Quran are all existing in Fatiha. وَمَا فِي الْفَاتِحَةِ فِي الْبِسْمِ. Meaning all of those of Fatiha, in Bismillah you'll find all the secrets of God. وَمَا فِي الْبِسْمِ فِي الْبَاءِ Bismillah. All of the secrets of Bismillah and the Quran and the heavens are in that one letter of Ba'i Bismillah. وَمَا فِي الْبِسْمِ فِي الْبَاءِ Bismillah. وَمَا فِي الْبَاءِ Bismillah فِي النُّقْطَةِ الَّتِي تَحْتَ الْبَاءِ Bismillah. All of the secrets of Bismillah are found in that one dot under Ba'i Bismillah. وَقَالَ عَلِي بْنِ أَبِي طَالِبٍ أَنَا نُقْطَةَ الَّتِي تَحْتَ الْبَاءِ Bismillah. I am that dot under the whole bar in which all of Quran rests upon this thing. Now we understand Al-Quran ma Ali wa Ali ma Al-Quran. This book is with him everywhere he goes and he's with him everywhere he goes. So whether they have the Qurans on their spears, he can say, Hada Quran natiq wa ana Quran samit. That's the Salqan. I'm the speaking Quran. I taught you Islam. Ta'wil comes from me. Ana rasikhuna fil ilm. So, coming to the end of this point, when we don't know something about the Quran, we go back to Ahlul Bayt. This is the very thing which was not being done in the time of Abu Abdullah. In his life, in his time, Quran Ahlul Bayt, there was a split between these two things, which means what? They would follow Quran without going back to Ahlul Bayt. If you look at the books of Maqtal of Abu Abdullah, throughout his journey, for some reason, he's doing tafsir of the Quran on day of Ashura. Sometimes literally, he's mentioning verses on Ashura which have no place being mentioned there unless you're trying to make a point on the journey and there itself. On the way there he says, who's an Imam? An Imam is the one who lives by the book and practices the book, Al-Kitab. Okay. On the way to Karbala, in Tha'labiyah, a man comes to him, a Kufan man. And the narration says the man either insults him or does something which is not in supporting his mission. Imam says, if you came to Medina, I would have showed you in my house where Jibreel would keep entering and giving wahi to Rasulullah. I would have showed you. Abu Abdullah says this on the way to Karbala. I would have showed you where Rasulullah sat when he received the revelation from Jibreel. I would have told you, that's who I am. Then he says, all of that ilm is from my family. That's why I'm going to Karbala. I have that ilm with me. Okay. On the way to Karbala, someone says, Ya Abu Abdullah, explain this verse. Which verse? On one day of judgment, every person will be raised by their Imam. Imam Hussain says on that day. This is my last point. There will be an Imam guiding you towards Hudan, an Imam guiding you towards Dalala. One Imam takes you towards heaven, one Imam takes you towards hell. I am now going to Karbala. And then he says, let whoever wishes to join me, join me. Karbala happens because words are not being listened to their meaning anymore. Words don't have meaning anymore. A man can be Qari of Quran and kill the one on whom Quran was revealed. A man can spend his whole life being Hafiz of Quran, teacher of Quran, and be on the opposite side killing Abu Abdullah. The word lost its meaning. So today in our lives, and this is my conclusion to all of you, when someone mentions Quran to us, or there is some movement or some trend happening and they use Quran, ask yourself, does this come from Ahlul Bayt or not? They are the authority. And when I believe in the Quran, I have to make sure, does my interpretation of this verse of Quran go back to Ali Muhammad? And in a world today where they are trying to take meaning away from words, be the one person in the room who says, no, I follow both the words of the Quran and the spirits behind the Quran. Inshallah. Sallallahu Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We have taken much time in our discussion. Let us now turn our attention towards the musibah and the sadness of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. On this night of Moharram, we remember the precise moment when all of the ashab of Imam Hussain alayhi salam have been shaheed. And all that's left are family and friends. That's all that's left. On the night before Ashura, they say all of the mothers of the young children are with them, preparing them for warfare. One mother is with one child, another with another child. Zainab speaks to two sons and says the following words: tomorrow, don't embarrass me in front of my master Abu Abdullah. And don't embarrass me on the day of judgment when I go to my mother Zahra and she asks me, Zainab, who did you give for the sake of Abu Abdullah? On Muhammad. On is 13, Muhammad is 11. On Muhammad. When the time comes, don't embarrass me to go tomorrow. So now imagine the time on Ashura when they say Zainab leaves from her camp and sees what? Hussain has just come back from the Maqtal carrying a body with a spear going through, laying the body down saying, Wa Ali Akbar, Wa Ali Akbar. Zainab sees the body and turns and says, Oh Muhammad, how can you live when the son of Hussain has been killed in front of me? And they say, Ya Umm Zainab, Abu Abdullah will not give us ijazah to go and fight. So the narrations tell us. Zainab says, Ya Abu Abdullah, on the day of Akhirah, when you go to my mother Zahra holding Ali Akbar, I will be holding no one. For you are not giving ijazah to my sons to go and fight. Only then Abu Abdullah says, okay fine, on Muhammad, go and fight. Hussain and Abbas come, lift these two boys onto their horses and say, oh our two Shahzadeh, our two princes, go now into the Maqtal, go and make us proud. How do they make them proud? While they ride, on says, I am the son of Ja'far al-Tayyar.